And welcome
Hello.
back to round 6 of the Wide League. Roose Bane, am joined here by Savage Patch Kid, and
Me.
we've got some awesome matches here. We've got a Joe UX9 playing against one of the top players out of China, which is going to be KyogreSG. So really interesting matchup. Joe right now completely undefeated and has been rocking some impressive matches so far. I'm super excited to see what we've got going on here. What about you, Sav?
I am insanely excited after hearing just two pretty top tier players against each other to commentate it. I'm like, that's really cool. I'm excited for it. I've seen both. I'm pretty sure I've seen at least both of these players compete at least once, like in the actual like grand global circuit. So I think
Right.
that's very cool. This is neat. This is super neat.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's gonna be great. Joe has been really putting a lot of pressure, bringing an interesting team here. He's got Scarlet, Kingabit, Sylveon, rocking that High Dragon and Garchomp, Grimmsnarl as well for a lot of utility. So there's a lot on this team that there's a lot of potential here for Joe UX9. But of course, KyogreSG, one of the best players coming out of China, probably going to bring up a lot of competition here. I don't exactly know what they're running just yet, but you know, we've seen a lot coming out of Kingabit so far, and especially with that flying Terra type in the last match here. I don't exactly remember if we've seen quite yet or not what Joe UX9 is running on that as far as a Terra type. But how do you see the advantages of terrestrialization playing off in this tournament right now?
I mean, I think it is such a strange potential point of pivot. Try saying that 10 times fast.
Yeah.
In any match that we see it in.
Right.
And I think it's very usefulness comes in with that versatility.
And it looks like we have our team previews up here, so let's get a sneak peek at KyogreSG's team as well as we transition over here. Looks like Meowscarada, Scarelage, Annihilate, which we've seen a lot of this tournament, Grimmsnarl as well, Salamence and Garganacl. So kind of matching UX9, at least in the Grimmsnarl department and in the Scarelage department there. Very interesting picks.
We do have some mirror picks going on this particular team setup, and I think that's really interesting. I do want to particularly shout out and point out Joe UX9's Sylveon choice right there. Having just recently gone through some competitive ladder with Sylveon on my team, a really solid potential coverage option for spread moves, but also in a meta where we have a lot of things that are favoring steel Terra typing, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. You have to weigh that gamble pretty carefully.
Yeah, you certainly do. And, you know, Sylveon, of course, having a lot of prowess in this meta with Dragon having such superiority here and that 4 times weakness to Fairy. We'll see what these leads are. SG is going to lead out here with Garganacl and Grimmsnarl shining bright, and Kingabit and Grimmsnarl for Joe UX9. So Grimmsnarl on both sides of the fields here on this first turn.
Shout out to the nickname choice for the Joey's Grimmsnarl Goblin mode. Huge fan of that. But it seems like we have some pretty defensive leads here from both players with screen setting Grimmsnarl on both sides and complemented by a Garganacl over there on KyogreSG's. That's a pretty early setup to a pretty effective wall. I'm really interested in seeing what strategies Joe's going to employ to try and address the issue of the Garganacl here.
You gotta also wonder what that Kingabit's carrying with that Terra type as well. It typically doesn't like to sit there and just stay in its original form because it has that 4 times weakness to fighting, and everything gets a fighting move. So we see the terrestrialization coming right here off the bat into the Garganacl. And this is going to be KyogreSG's Garganacl here, turning it into a flying type, making sure it has neutral to that ground type moves. Of course, could be a critical for whatever it decides to carry here. Reflect coming off of this Grimmsnarl, going to make sure it is a lot more fit to take on this Kingabit taunt. Coming off of the Grimmsnarl, not going to allow this Garganacl to get off some critical status moves as we see the Iron Head going into that Grimmsnarl, going to take it right below 50 HP, and the Salt Cure going into Kingabit. Not doing too much here, but that damage over time, especially with that Salt Cure, really adds up. And we'll see actually the damage, the progressive damage over time actually doing more than the initial move itself.
Yeah, especially when you're pairing up Salt Cure against these Steel and Water types, you have to be especially wary because your damage over time is actually going to be doubled against those two typings. So even though you might have a resistance to the actual primary damage of the move, your DOT is going to stack that much higher, that much faster.
Right.
It's a bit of a sneak play, but I absolutely love it. And I mean, Garganackle really showing just how offensively effective it can be in a
Right.
long game.
Right, we see two switches here, and Fernape coming in for, or Annihilate coming in for the Grimmsnarl on Kyogre's side. The Reflect going to come up for Grimmsnarl on Joe UX9 side. The Salt Cure going to go into that Grimmsnarl. Is not going to take out too much. Of course, the damage over time is the big component there. And we see, of course, Joe UX9 switching in Kingambit for that Sylveon, not wanting to let that Salt Cure take off too much damage before it really gets anything rolling here. So very, very interesting setup here. Of course, you know, the critical play, not getting that Swords Dance off. Protect coming off of this Annihilate is going to keep it safe. And of course, a light screen, going to make sure dual screens are up for both sides with that Grimmsnarl taking full advantage of that Hyper Voice going to come off of this Sylveon. It's not going to go into that Primate, but this Garganackle is going to take it at full force. Salt Cure going to go straight into that Sylveon as well, start to do some damage over time as well there. So now each passing turn, Joe UX9 is taking two stacks of Salt Cure damage on both Pokemon. Really, really something that, you know, if left unchecked, could take the match away.
It's a really tricky back foot to be left on for sure. With Garganackle, you're always going to see more utility out of Salt Cure's DOT than you ever are out of its initial damage with the base power of only 40. But it's really showing that, like, as effective and as long as Garganackle can tend to stay on the field, that Salt Cure can really, really get a lot of mileage. Oh, and especially when you're playing defensively with a wide guard here.
The taunt goes away, so Wide Guard comes back for this Garganackle as the Meowscarada switches in here. It's gonna be protected by that Wide Guard from that Hyper Voice, so nothing going off there. Could have been critical with its Dark typing, of course. There, Spirit Break's gonna fire off from this Grimmsnarl into the Garganackle, not doing too much. Special attack drop, not hurting Garganackle as well, but. The Rocky Helmet damage going to do a little bit of tick there as the Salt Cure procs for both Grimmsnarl and the Sylveon, stacking more damage on Joe UX9's side.
Yeah, that Salt Cure really just putting in a lot of mileage here. I'm interested to see in how we're going to respond with Sylveon here, now knowing that Wide Guard is back on the table again and that taunt has passed. Do we take another turn to try and reinstitute taunt? Do we try a more defensive or offensive pivot to try and make up some ground here? I'm really interested to see what's going to happen on Grimmsnarl's on Joe's side of the field here for the rest of this turn.
Right, Protean here could become pretty beneficial, especially if it can help cover for that fairy disadvantage. But it's all going to depend on who can get off these moves first. Of course, waiting for these moves to connect here. We're going to see Sylveon coming back for Joe UX9 side. Not going to let it take too much damage here and possibly reset up itself. And we see the taunt coming off of the Grimmsnarl into that Garganackle. No more Wide Guards coming out of that. Knockoff going from into that Sylveon, not going to do too much now that it is a Kingambit, but knocking off a critical item there. Body Press going into the Grimmsnarl plus the Salt Cure, but Grimmsnarl still is able to hang in there just by a thread.
Hanging on by a hair. Get it? Because it's covered in them.
Oh, there you go.
There we go. Grimmsnarl just barely managing to hang in there and Kingambit taking some really unfortunate loss of its weakness policy there. So really interested to see what potential recovery we're going to see from Kingambit and going for a protect. So we're at least going to try and set up for hopefully a better long game condition here.
Yeah, setting it up with the Protect. Flower Trick coming off the Meowscarada is going to go into the Grimmsnarl. It's going to connect and take it out. Well, only 1 HP. Surely that's going to take that one off the field here as we see the Garganackle going in for the Body Press, but of course it is protected. Now, I believe Joe has yet to Terrastalize, so whatever Kingambit could be hiding back here could be critical to how this match turns out here. And we see Guinevere the Sylveon coming back out, potentially able to put in some Hyper Voice. We know that taunt is still active. and there's no wide guards that can keep that Meowscarada safe. And
We know
so,
Masquerade has already used knockoff, so if it has
right.
Protean shifted, it's Protean shifted entirely into Dark type, so it's going to be weak against that Hyper Voice. And now it's considering that Wide Guard is still currently at the moment disabled.
Right. And this should be interesting positioning here. We're going to see Garganacl coming back for Kyogre. And in its place is going to be Grimmsnarl yet again, someone who could probably take a Hyper Voice at least. And we see the Terastallization finally coming out for Joe UX9's side. That's going to be into the Sylveon this time, and is going to make it a Fire-type Sylveon. Very interesting pivot here as we see these plays go off.
That it really is a interesting offensive pivot there here on Joe UX9.
The Protect coming off of the Meowscarada is going to be keeping it safe. Hyper Voice is not going to connect with the Meowscarada after that Protect, but it will connect into this Grimmsnarl, taking it all the way out. And a critical KO here, possibly, for Joe UX9, kind of starting to put the board state at a better position for him.
Yes, in fact, we're starting to get to the point where we're losing screens on both sides of the field now that Grimmsnarl is out of the picture on both sides. We're not going to get those reset. Annihilate coming out, really setting up some really scary physical offensive pressure here against Joe UX9, especially with those fighting type weaknesses that he has on the field now.
Yes, we saw that Kingambit was not the one to go for the Terastallization, so of course that fighting type is a big threat on the other side. Now, don't have to worry about Rage Fist as much, at least with a Kingambit standpoint, with it being a dark type. But, of course, its ability stack is something that you definitely don't want to get in the front of it. The knockoff coming into the Sylveon's going to knock off its specs, and a Drain Punch will finish off the Sylveon on Joe UX9's side here. Looking a little bit grim, but only Kingambit now left to attack. Kingambit doesn't go for the Kowtow Cleave into Annihilate, but it is not enough to take it out. But it looks like it will be enough to oh, that's just a little bit of leftovers. So a little bit of leftovers reheal there on the Kingambit. Not a weakness policy going off.
No. Yeah, the dark damage being neutralized between that fighting and ghost typing on Annihilate is really
I had to think about that for a second. Yeah. But yeah, very, very interesting plays here, and Kyogre now in a great position. Hydreigon's going to come out for Joe UX9 and really round out the side of the field. So, you know, with what you have here, of course, you've got to worry about the fighting type advantages now that Annihilate has. Now, I think Hydreigon may be able to outspeed it. I'm not quite positive on those speed tiers, but we'll see. Meowscarada is going to go for the knockoff into Hydreigon. Of course, not very effective on this dark type, but will knock off that Assault Vest. Draco Meteor firing off into Annihilate is just enough to leave it with a sliver of health and a critical special attack drop as this Drain Punch goes in to Hydreigon. It's able to give a little bit of HP back to this Annihilate. We'll see what Kingambit goes for here as the Iron Head goes into Meowscarada, leaving it with just a sash left. Very, very critical play here.
Series of very dramatic gasps back and forth. They're trading some serious blows on both sides of the field. Absolutely stunning show of offensive force on both sides there. Really, really proving just how much you can very, very quickly make up with just one place move and a focus sash.
Hydreigon hanging in there, absolutely clutch at this late in the match, especially able to get off those critical attacks. That Draco Meteor obviously doing a lot of work. I know that probably Joe UX9 is disappointed that it didn't actually get the KO there, but still putting in a hefty amount. And then you got to also worry about the Sucker Punch coming off of Kingambit. At this point, you know, you can't really attack without worrying about it. Protect's going to come off that Meowscarada just in case a Sucker Punch is coming that way. Double Protect for Kyogre here. Going to try to see what exactly Joe X Unit 9 is planning. Sucker Punch, of course, fails due to the Protect, and the Dark Pulse, of course, is going to go into the Protected Annihilate and not do anything here. So a good defensive play here by Kyogre.
Yeah, really unfortunate timing with the double Protect. It would have been a great opportunity in retrospect to maybe set up a Tailwind on Joe UX9's side. It's not uncommon in this method from what we've seen just so far tonight for Primate to be frequently Choice Banded. So jumping up. Choice Scarf. Jumping ahead of that speed tier with a really, really scary single offensive moves. But hopefully, maybe taking over some speed control could go in Joe UX9's favor here, especially now knowing that you have Protect on both opposite sides of the Mons. But going into a Sucker Punch, not doing quite enough.
Sucker Punch, yes, going into that Annihilate is not enough to take it out. Meowscarada will take down the High Dragon before it gets a chance to fire back. And Annihilate is the only one left here with a Drain Punch going into this Kingambit, and that will be game with Kyogre taking the round 1 here.
Absolutely. Just some really, really constant and steady offensive pressure coming off of Kyogre's side of the field. Joe, I felt like Joe was never able to quite position around it the way that he needed to. But I'm very, very excited and interested to see what kind of choice corrections and pivots we're going to make on Joe's side, because it really came down to just some key single turn decisions there that I feel like could have definitely shifted the momentum of that match.
Some interesting plays there by Kyogre for sure, and the Annihilate really being critical to that end game, right? If they if Kyogre can get himself in a position where you have something like High Dragon and the Kingambit as the last two final plays there, I mean Annihilate it pretty much covers that in every dimension that it needs to. So that's the pretty solid positioning there for KyogreSG, but of course the Sylveon proving also to be a huge threat there. The Fire-type Terrestrialization, a little bit of an interesting choice there. Don't know if it necessarily ended up working out the way that that Joe wanted it to, but it's interesting to see exactly what everyone's choosing for Terra types on all of these different Mons. The Fire-type Sylveon, I think it's the first time I've seen that personally.
I've seen it a handful of times, mostly for, I guess, I'm assuming, some of your defensive coverage options, because it's going to remove your Steel type weaknesses, and the occasional off-meta choice of a Terra Blast or a Mystical Fire on a Sylveon, giving you additional damage stab there. The one thing I'm very, very interested in, and especially seeing the frequency of just some of the matches that we've watched today, is the advent of Wide Guard. Defensively as an option for a lot of people, and I'm not saying it's directly in response to Sylveon, but it seems to shut down Sylveon almost every single time, because so much of Sylveon's offensive pressure is built up around the Hyper Voice Throat Spray combo to get that early special attack ramp up. So it's shutting down that spread, it's shutting down that early game attack boost, so you can't just continue, you can't begin to snowball from there, and it's really, really crippling for Sylveon not to be able to get that set up as quickly as possible to really, really help kind of set the tone in Sylveon's favor for the rest of the match.
Yeah, and we'll see how that tone sets. Looks like we're about 20 seconds out from this next match starting, so we'll go ahead and transition over there. And again, we see, of course, the same team, a lot of mirror matches here with the Grimmsnarl and the Skrellige, but we didn't see, the only mirror match that we ended up really seeing was, of course, those Grimmsnarls coming out there, and it's really interesting to see what both teams would do. I mean, it seems like the very, very similar sets, not really going with the Grimson set that we've seen a little bit shown now that it has Parting Shot.
We have Grimson at home.
We have Grimson at home, exactly. But now we see the leads for Joe UX9. It looks like Grimmsnarl and Skrellige, and we're going into Kingambit and Sylveon, two Pokemon that have shown to be pretty prominent and very helpful for Joe in the previous match. What do you think about these leads adjustments?
I think the lead adjustment on on Kyogre's side is particularly interesting, because I feel like there's a lot of a lot you can set yourself up for offensively if you get your screens in the right place, depending on how what particular is in this Grimmsnarl's kit. We know it has both screens to set up, and those extra defensive buffs are really, really helpful and supportive for Skeledirge here, especially on a turn 1. We could easily see a switch out, and that Skeledirge could swap into something like a Garganacl or a Meowscarada for a more better defensive option there, and play a little bit of a mind game. But we do see Terrestrialize and go into the Grimmsnarl.
Wow, Steel type Grimmsnarl here. You've seen it first here, folks. Very, very interesting pick for a Terrestrialization as the Will-O-Wisp comes off from the Skrellige into the Kingambit, a critical attack drop there. Of course, a little bit of DOT, but the most importantly, cutting that attack in a critical spot here. Spirit Break's going to fire off into the Sylveon from this Grimmsnarl, and critical special attack drop as we see Cowdo Cleave going into Scarlet. And while it does bring it below 50 HP, that berry is going to prop it right back up and put it in a good, healthy spot. So a pretty good positioning here if you're Kyogre.
I agree, and especially since I just noticed after that first round that Joe is actually not running Throat Spray on his Sylveon. He's running Choice Specs instead, so choosing to opt for a little bit of a different offensive strategy there. But that Spirit Break going into that Sylveon, in addition to the Steel Terror typing come out of that Grimmsnarl just became the biggest bully for that Sylveon on the field right now, hence why we're probably seeing the switch out now on Joe's side.
And we see it now going, Scarlet going for the slack off, going to return that health right back to normal. Spirit Break's going to fire off into that Garchomp and does not like that. Special attack drop, not as concerning, but the Rough Skin doing a little bit of chip damage here as the Cowdo Cleave goes into Scarlet, still not doing as much as Joe would probably like for it to, but still keeping that offensive pressure on strong.
Yeah, Skeletor is showing just how much of a wall it can be if it's paired with the right assistant and if it's put in the right positioning.
And with the Will-O-Wisp burn.
And with a Will-O-Wisp burn and a slack off just to restore more of that HP. I mean, between Skeletor, I think, has a lot of support moves that are actually surprisingly slept on, slack off being one of them. And it's really, really inconvenient to have to deal with those things over and over again while you're snowballing Torch Song.
See both sides switching here. Kingambit going back in for a Hydreigon, and a Annihilape coming out on Kyogre's side. Earthquake's going to fire off from this Garchomp. Of course, Levitate's going to keep a Hydreigon in a safe space, but this new Steel-type Grimmsnarl does not like that Earthquake, but it doesn't have enough to pick up the KO quite yet.
Yeah, very carefully timed reflect on Kyogre's side of the field, really helping mitigate a lot of that Earthquake damage, unfortunately. But knowing that we have that spread move available for, and currently nothing with Wide Guard on Kyogre's side of the field, could be an opportunity to really make up some ground here.
See the Protect coming off of Annihilape, going to keep it safe for yet another turn. Rock Slide's going to fire off from the Kyogre side here, and we see that's going into both slots here. Of course, Annihilate kept safe. Grimmsnarl is going to go down. So it's a clean pickup here for Joe UX9. Looks like Hydreigon's going to probably end up going into this Protect, if anything.
Yeah, we do see the Life Orb being revealed there. But Dark Pulse not going into that Annihilate there with the Protect.
Yeah, not getting too far past it. But of course, it's not going to want to take one of those Dark Pulses from Hydreigon. It's got a lot of power behind it now, and I believe we still have yet to see Joe Terrastalize, so there's a lot of potential there, especially with what it can do with Terrastallation. We know that Hydreigon excuse me, has a lot of potential when it comes to Terrastalization, so it could be interesting to see what exactly Joe's able to pull out with that.
Exactly. You make a very good point. There are so many Hydreigon being as effective as it is with the damage and speed that it has, and being able to stay up a Tailwind. There's a lot of different Terrastalizations you can throw out with that Pokemon to either drastically and exponentially increase its usefulness defensively or offensively. And I'd be interested to see if that's who Joe's Terrastalization pick is going to be for this round, as we are rejoined by both Kingambit and Hydreigon switching out for Sylveon.
Yeah, so a full court swap here for Joe UX9 as Meowscarada goes for a Protect, trying to keep it safe. Annihilate, of course, not going to want to do that, and it goes straight into that Sylveon, who takes that Drain Punch quite well. So interesting turn here, and a critical board swap here for Joe.
Absolutely, and what a great call, be it either by choice or by just good old fashioned luck that Sylveon that he chose those specific slot placements, and Drain Punch going into the Sylveon. Otherwise, had it chosen the other target, could have been a really devastating switch in for Kingambit. But Sylveon's going to be sticking around for just a little bit longer, and I'm interested to see what kind of contributions it's going to make here with the Flower Trick coming off the Meowscarada. And already removing it from the field anyway.
Sylveon goes down right here. But then we see, of course, the Drain Punch going into Kingambit, and it is enough to take it out. Annihilate now sitting at full HP. and Kyogre in a prominent position here to take this game too.
Absolutely. Two devastating KOs on Joe's side with two dragons in the back, one of whom has already taken a significant amount of damage. They have their work cut out for them for sure. I do see some really carefully placed offensive choices here on his part, potentially turning this match around. But it's definitely going to be an uphill battle for him right now.
Right, right. It will be certainly an interesting one to see how this all ends up shaking out. You've got to think that the terrestrialization coming into play here, of course, we've talked earlier about how Hydreigon really has the potential to take advantage of that. Don't know necessarily if it has the advantage to take advantage of it in this situation, but we can see. And yeah, it's gonna again. Kyogre now has the Pokemon lead. It's gonna be hard for Joe to turn around in this spot.
Agreed. Masquerada coming out with the flower trick here.
Ooh,
Oh,
enough
goodbye,
to take
Garchomp.
out the Garchomp. So the Garchomp will go down, and it's all up to this Hydreigon. And a dream here. Dark Pulse going to fire off this Hydreigon into Annihilape. Not enough to take it out, and the Drain Punch will bring this Annihilape right back up to full health.
Yeah, just completely turning that damage around, unfortunately. Primeape really proving to be a very effective obstacle here for Joe to have to get through. And unfortunately, I just don't think the damage placement is going to be able to work out.
Yeah, and it looks like Joe will call it here. So it's a clean 2-0 now for Kyogre. But honestly, the 2-0 there doesn't reflect the back and forth of those matches there. There's a lot that could have gone either way. But Kyogre here really did come in with a dominant performance right out the gate that helped him really secure things. What are your thoughts?
I mean, to your point, I really agree. There were some points in both of those games where it literally can't. It would come down to a single move doing just enough or just not quite enough damage. It felt like on both sides, and unfortunately, it just seemed like just that little bit counted every single time. Something really to be said for that +4 EV wherever you decide to put it.
Right.
When you're creating some of these team builds, because like it felt like a lot of Mons on Kyogre's side of the field were like made it by a hair, and it was a hair in the right place every single time.
Right. Absolutely some critical survivals there by Kyogre, and GG's to both players there. And that'll wrap it up for round 6. Round 7's coming up next. But Sav, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you've got to head off and do some moderator duties. So it was a pleasure having you, and it was always a pleasure casting with you.
Let's go. It was great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. This was a ton of fun. Good luck to everyone on the rest of your matches. In the meantime, I will catch y'all later.
Yep. See you guys in a second with round 7.